Hey everybody, welcome to the DynastyPros Devy Show. Alongside SC Romero, Justin Taylor, and our special guest tonight, Austin Nace, I'm Tommy Harvey. Tonight we'll dive into looking at Devy relevant players by conference. Next up right here is the SEC West. Last time we did the East. Plus we'll have a little bit of Devy news, all that coming up right now. Sorry about that, guys. How are y'all doing tonight?
Good, man. Good. Another beautiful day. It's cool weather out here on the West Coast. I know some people down south are getting some heat, but enjoying this cool weather right now.
Oh, good for you because it's nice and hot here. JT, you frozen up there? You on here with us? There you are. Yeah, we got you. Hey, Austin. Go ahead and tell us about yourself, buddy.
Yeah, so I am a Taurus. Hi guys, my name's Austin. I am at Devy Deets on Twitter. And I love Devy and Campus to Canton. That's everything that I cover. Everything I do is over at campustocanton.com. I'm excited to talk Devy, which I feel like I don't get to just talk pure Devy that much anymore. So I'm excited to be on here with you guys tonight. Thank you guys so much for having me on here. And I got like the best conference division to talk about. So, I mean, this is like a dream come true if you're talking Devy, right? Bama, LSU, I mean, all these schools that are just loaded with guys here.
Absolutely. We're glad. We're very happy to have you on. Anytime you want to come on, just holler at me. Obviously, you're more than welcome. Before we get started tonight, everybody, just do us a favor. Hit that thumbs up and subscribe. If you'd like to know when we go live, make sure you hit that notification bell on YouTube. Let's just go ahead and dive right in. A little bit of Devy news, not really a whole lot. I saw the other day where running back Jarrett Gibson committed to Texas. That's obviously more for next year moving forward. Other than that, there was a wide receiver who also committed to Alabama today. Was that today?
I am not aware.
Believe so. I'll have to dig into that a little bit more. But the main news over the last couple of days was Jarrett Gibson committing to Texas, and I know a couple of Longhorn fans who are super stoked about that. With them coming into the SEC here next year, I guess that's pretty big news. Let's go ahead and jump into it, guys. First team we're going to talk about. May as well go with the big one, University of Alabama. Let's kind of kick it off talking about their quarterbacks here. Their quarterback room, Tyler Buchner transferring in from Notre Dame, and then they got Ty Simpson, who was a freshman last year, Jalen Milroe, who played a little bit whenever Bryce Young was hurt. And then they bring in a couple of pretty big time freshmen, Eli Holstein and Dylan Lonergan. What do you guys think about those guys?
It's going to be an interesting battle in this quarterback room, because Milroe has that experience, right? He's a dual-threat quarterback. He can sell a play fake. He has a good arm to make the throws. But then you have Buchner coming in that possibly will end up being that starter there, this upcoming season, just because he's more of your all-around quarterback, I feel like, for the team. I do like Ty Simpson, but, I mean, for me, Eli Holstein is the big body to be watching out for. I don't think he gets necessarily the playing time right now. That's just not how Bama rolls. But I think he's their quarterback in the long term. I don't see him entering in transfer portal or anything. I think the team ends up becoming him. I mean, he's a big boy. He can make the throws, and he doesn't really fold under pressure. In a lot of tape I watched him, if the pocket's collapsing around him, he still makes the accurate throws, and that's in rain or shine. He's still making some dimes on it, and you put him in an offense like Alabama, he's only going to grow with the weapons he gets.
Yeah, I like the addition of Tyler Buchner. Tommy Reese was pretty influential in bringing him in from Notre Dame. That's where obviously he came from Notre Dame as well. They're an offense that they're an offense that seems to be a little bit in flux right now. Their past several quarterbacks have been really, really good. They haven't had to really worry about it. They went from Jalen Hurts and Tua and Mac Jones to Bryce Young. Now it's like it's kind of a little bit of a situation there for them. They don't really know what they have, and I know a lot of their fans are actually really concerned about that going on right now. Hey, Austin, what do you have to say about their quarterback room?
Yeah, I think they've definitely made some, bad 50-50 calls on the recruiting trail in the past couple of years. They could have had conceivably Drake May and Riley Leonard in that room, and they've kind of, chosen between two guys, chosen another guy, and it seems probably chosen incorrectly every single time. I actually don't know that I like any of these guys. I think they're just going to have to re-roll again next year. Julian Sayin they have coming in, he just won 11. I don't know that he's an upside guy, but depending on how these guys play this year in terms of, Nick Saban does not tolerate mistakes. He's not going to tolerate turnovers. And I think all these guys are players that are going to make mistakes. They're going to, make a wrong read. They're going to be running a lot more, which means they're probably a little more prone to fumbling. So I don't know that any of these guys is a long-term solution there, or at least not a guy that I love, but it is a lot of just raw athletic talent. I mean, Milroe, Holstein, Buckner, Simpson. I mean, these were dual threat kind of guys. So you can clearly see that's the direction they want to go. It just hasn't really worked out for them trying to pick and choose the right name. Yeah.
Milroe is a guy who can definitely run, not a very good passer. There were times last year whenever he was filling in for Bryce Young that he would just bounce a ball, just nowhere near anybody. But then he takes off for a 70-yard touchdown run. And it's just, you're able to see what he has as an athlete. He just has to get better a lot better as a passer.
I think that's where his upside will come in, because especially with the running back room they have, they might utilize that read option. So they might see a lot more of him on the field, just because you'll have the threat of the quarterback and the running backs there, right? So I think he's definitely someone to watch out for in the room, not necessarily for his passing abilities, but because he's able to fake out the defenders.
Yeah. And it looks like JT kind of froze out there. Hopefully he'll jump back on here in a second. Let's go and move on to running backs. That's kind of where their bread is buttered here. Jace McClellan and Royale Williams coming back from last year's squad, as well as Jamari Miller. Jam Miller was a pretty big time freshman recruit last year, and then now they're also bringing in an elite running back in Justice Haynes, and then another pretty good one in Richard Young. What do you guys have to say about them?
Go ahead, Austin, if you start off.
Yeah, we've been banging the drum pretty consistently that Jace McClellan might be the most underrated running back in college this year, in terms of the fact that there's a legit chance he's a top 50 pick in this year's NFL draft, and I don't think that people are really baking that into his value. I see him going after quite a few running backs that I don't know that he necessarily has any business going after. We know that he's a 3-down guy. They tried to use him as a receiving back his freshman year before he got hurt, and he would look very competent doing that. He's not Jahmyr Gibbs as a receiver, but he could be a Najee Harris-esque kind of guy where, dump off screens, kind of close to the line of scrimmage, low A-dot type of stuff is really where he's going to thrive. Coming out of high school, he was the best spark athlete in the class at the position. He's over 210 pounds. He's playing for a premier program that we just talked about how bad their quarterback room is. They might run the ball more this year than they have in the past. So he's going to get a chance to showcase kind of what he can do. I really, really would not be surprised if coming out of this year, scouts are talking about him as an early second round kind of guy. And we see him automatically as like a top 10-ish dynasty back as soon as he comes in, depending on his landing spot.
Sure.
I like that. I agree. The thing is, I think last year he had like 13 receptions for over 150 yards or something like that. So, it's interesting to see how he can be used, because Was it he wasn't getting as many opportunities to catch the ball, or he just gets the big play abilities, to have that many receptions and get over 10 yards a carry, with it after the catch. But also bringing in those rookie running backs. We were talking about Georgia last time, how they just have that cycle, just constantly bringing in people at that running back position. And Alabama's another team that does that. Justin Haynes and Richard Young, 2 out of the top 5, I believe, athletes or running backs coming into this year's class, and they got them both, so it's going to be interesting to see how they're going to do that, because I do believe it's McKellen's spot to be taken, but both these guys are a threat to come in and take some reps from him as well. So it'll be interesting to see. I like them more in the running back room behind McKellen, but with them being rookies or freshmen, you may see them redshirt, and that's totally okay in an Alabama offense. You can take a step back, relax, get to learn it, and then boom out your next year. But both those running backs are amazing, and I'm excited to see what they can bring to the table.
Well, I definitely see Jace Young being that RB1 there. Let's not forget about Jamarian Miller. He was a high 4-star running back coming in last year. Has a ton of talent. Alabama loves to stack talent there at running back as well. So I mean, they're constantly rolling guys over. So I mean, you're going to see McClellan. You're going to see maybe a little bit of Roydell Williams, kind of as that banger type of guy. And then you're gonna see Jam Miller, and you're going to see some Justice Haynes. I really believe that Richard Young kind of may be buried a little bit there on the depth chart.
With those freshmen coming in, we liked Jam Miller last year. I liked Jam Miller last year. It wouldn't shock me if we see him kind of go the Jerome Ford route with his career, where maybe Haynes looked good in spring. I think he's going to have a hard time. They're going to have a hard time keeping him off the field long term. I could see Miller transferring, down. Everywhere's down from Alabama. There's really no lateral there. Moving down a half a step or a step and being very productive at another school, get into the NFL. And Jerome Ford went in the 5th round, but he has value now. I mean, he's probably the backup running back on the Browns. If something happens to Nick Chubb, I mean, that's a very valuable player. So I think that's a very realistic career path for Jam Miller. And honestly, I think Roydell Williams could be the kind of guy that just is like a Jamal Williams occasionally, where he's just annoying in the NFL because he steals touchdowns. I mean, I legitimately think all 5 of those guys are probably NFL running backs as long as there's no injuries. Knock on wood. I really, really do.
Yeah, as long as Jam Miller doesn't go to SMU and turn into Kamar Wheaton, right?
I think there's other issues with Kamar Wheaton that we don't have to get into on this show. But yeah, I mean, just go someplace where you're going to. If that's, you got to make that transfer count. Some of these guys, I think they're a little flippant with where they end up choosing.
Yeah, I actually really like Trey Sanders' landing spot, though. I thought that was a pretty smart choice of him.
And so I know we talked about our Dynasty Pros trade calculator that's now on the site. I put in, it has Devy in there and, IDP and stuff, but I put in a Devy trade that we calculated as fair. And that was for if you go and get Justin Haynes and Richard Young and you trade away David Montgomery and Mike Williams. Now, to me, both those guys are value of this season, right? Quentin Johnston's there to possibly take over the Mike Williams role. David Montgomery, he has Jamar Gibbs to worry about now, but they might have value this season. So it could be a time to trade now for them, but get some younger running backs in the future that have some high value. What do y'all think about the trade like that?
I actually kind of like it. I see Mike Williams kind of trending downwards, like you said, with Quentin Johnston there. He's also very often injured, and then David Montgomery moving to that kind of Mark Ingram role, to Jahmyr Gibbs being the Alvin Kamara type guy there for the Lions. Now, obviously Ingram had a lot of value there with the Saints, but so I mean. They may be able to catch lightning in a bottle twice. I just think it's going to be more Gibbs centric than anything there.
I think it's an upside move because you're taking the freshmen before they pop, right? You're taking them before they have relevance in the college career. So it's a risk, but it's one of those. It could be a high risk, high reward kind of move in the future.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I think Haynes. The nice thing about a player like Haynes is that we're going to see just enough of him this year where we get excited, but he's not going to have enough opportunity to blow it and hurt his stock. I think he's a perfect, you're just investing in him. he's going to stay the same price, or he's probably going to increase in price even if he does nothing over the course of the offseason. And then if you want to sell him again next offseason as he steps into a role for a better player than David Montgomery or Mike Williams, who are both, as you guys said, probably descending assets. And that's the kind of guy that I like to invest in these kinds of leagues, especially Devy, where it's not like a C2C where, you know, these guys are getting you points. You know, they're just sitting there looking at you. So anything I can do to not lose value is honestly just as important, if not more important, than gaining a bunch of value. Yeah. So he's really that, you know, kind of just one of those premium stocks that never really drops in price. You invest early, just sit there, and then you can sell them off later if you really, really want to.
Yeah, I've got Haynes as my RB2 in this class. So that's a lot of value to get for guys like David Montgomery and Mike Williams, I think.
Yeah. Agreed.
Let's move on to wide receiver here. They have a really loaded wide receiver room. I just don't think any of these guys are just dynamite, outstanding prospects. I think Malik Benson could be. You know, I think guys like Jalen Hale could be. Isaiah Bond, you know, looks like something also. But I've seen enough of Ja'Cory Brooks. I've seen enough of Jermaine Burton to kind of know that they're not really big time NFL prospects. What do you guys think?
I agree. This has been a kind of a flux year for Alabama. You know, y'all mentioned with the quarterback room, but now even going into their wide receivers, you know, from years past, you know, we had guys like your Jameson Williams come out, you know, and it's someone that can explode the offense and take them off the top, or he just has some good route running skills. And it's hard, you know, it's hard seeing these guys because is it their lack of talent or is it the lack of a quarterback play? You know, and that's something we'll find out this year to really be about it, because Bryce Young did great, right, with them. But I think it was more Bryce Young making the wide receivers look great than the wide receivers actually being great. So Ja'Cory Brooks, I'm excited to see what he can actually do, because this is, I think, the next step for him, right? So he can definitely raise his draft stock. He had a good QBR rating last year when he was being targeted of over 120. I think it was 124 or something like that. And, you know, Kendrick Law, Isaiah Bond, Saz Preston, all some young guys coming in as well that I think all have different relevancy on the offense. So it will be interesting, because I don't necessarily think they're all on the field at the same time, but when they're on the field at their separate times, you're going to see different wide receiver skills, whether it's taking it over the top, whether it's crisp route running, whether it's just showing your playmaking ability in the middle. They all have something different to bring to the table. So it's going to be a fun offense to dissect as we progress, because one of them is got to take that step to say, hey, I'm the alpha.
Yeah, Austin, do you have any thoughts on these wide receivers?
Yeah, I mean, I think SC was kind of just hitting the nail on the head there. When I'm drafting Devy, or, you know, C2C, because if you're taking Bama guys, you're taking them early anyway. It's essentially Devy. I'm looking for guys that have a skill set that nobody else on the team has, because that's going to be their path to playing somewhat early. And we obviously like when guys play a little bit early. And when I look at this room, the only guys that stand out to me in terms of like really unique skill sets are Bond and Benson. I think there's a lot of overlap between like Jalen Hale and Saz Preston. Prentice is kind of a low ADOT, not great yards after the catch, like not a great combination there. We, like you said, we have in Burton and Brooks. So I think just looking at Bond, who's a speedy guy, and then Malik Benson as well, who kind of is a little bit of a do-everything guy. I think those two stand out the most. It seems like they got the most buzz out of camp this year. I'm not sure. Like, everything just goes back to the quarterback situation here. You know, it makes the running backs look more appealing. They're going to get more touches. If none of these quarterbacks step up, none of these wide receivers are super appealing. So we're really depending a lot on Buckner as somebody to do something this year.
Right.
But if I'm betting on it, I'm betting Bond or I'm betting Benson, and then everybody else, I will let somebody else roster personally.
Yeah. Bond to me, in my opinion, kind of seems like what they wanted JoJo Earl to be. You know, a guy who can stretch the field, has good hands, can also take that kind of underneath screen and go with it. He's just going to burn you to death. So I kind of get the feeling he's what they wanted JoJo Earl to be. And of course, Earl is now at TCU. So, hey JT, good to have you back. You get your connection figured out?
Yeah, sorry about that, man. My computer just got wonky on me. My internet just was dropping like mad. I had Twitter set, so I'm back in. Hopefully, I'm good. Guys, let me know if I start falling behind again. But I think I'm good to go now.
Okay, good deal. All right, we're moving on to the Alabama tight ends here. On their, their room with guys who are somewhat relevant. You got C.J. Dupree, the tight end transfer from Maryland, Amari Niblack, and then Ty Lockwood, the incoming freshman. What are you guys seeing out of these three guys?
We have a lot of skill groups to talk about, so I'll keep it short. Not interested.
Yeah, I got you.
I was going to say the same thing. It's just Alabama, they're just never really using their tight ends much. So you just never know what these guys are actually going to be able to do until, honestly, I feel like you get to the NFL level and somebody takes a chance on them and they get in the right system. It's just so hard to see what anybody really has as far as a Devy perspective from Alabama at tight end. I mean, the one guy we thought was going to be, the end-all be-all was O.J. Howard, and he did nothing in the pros. So I just think it's very, very difficult with the tactics that they run to figure out if any of these guys are going to have much value at the next level. So I'm the same way. I just kind of avoid their tight ends and avoid the guys' hits. He's somebody that kind of fell through the cracks, and I get him in a supplemental draft.
He's They're sleepers. I mean, you look at what Cameron Latu, who went to the 49ers, it's just going to be – I'm not necessarily drafting these guys. If you're in C2C, sure, if you have that depth, or if it's like a deep Devy and you're just drafting all positions. But, your typical 10, 20-round Devies, I mean, they're not necessarily on my radar.
I think somebody like Niblack has probably the most potential of the three. But I've been burned way too often with Alabama tight ends. It's like you said, O.J. Howard, Irv Smith, Cameron Latu, and then Jaleel Billingsley. A couple of years ago, everybody thought he was going to be the next great thing, and he just kind of flamed out.
Billingsley is what makes me nervous about Niblack, because they now have Niblack listed at 233 on their website. I believe he came into school at like 210, 215. And they had Billingsley listed at like 235. And you could just watch Alabama games and say, there's 0% chance that guy is 235 pounds. He wore a weighted vest on the day that they weighed in. And I want to see Niblack now before I make that same call. But they're fooling me again. There's no chance he's 233.
Right. All right. Let's move on to our next school, Arkansas. They got a big-time running back prospect. Obviously, we all know about him, Raheem Sanders. But we're going to start off talking about their quarterbacks. Quarterback room: KJ Jefferson, Jacoby Criswell, Malachi Singleton. I think I like Jacoby Criswell more as a Devy asset more than KJ Jefferson. What do you guys think?
I think this is KJ Jefferson's year to. If he's not making it after a couple games, they're bringing in someone else. I think this is years to elevate and just show he can take full control of this team, even with Raheem Sanders, because it's going to run through him, right? But, just to take that next step in the quarterback position. I like yours as well, but, I definitely think it's KJ Jefferson's spot to be taken. Devy prospect, I mean, he's not one of my top QBs I'm looking at. Again, a deep one, I might take it, but the pride and joy here is Raheem Sanders, with the offense.
Well, Criswell took Drake May to the limit in fall camp last year as far as that QB competition. He almost beat him out. So I think that there's a lot of talent with Criswell. He obviously transferred away from North Carolina into another situation where he's also going to be the backup, which doesn't make any sense to me. He should have gone somewhere where he'd have been the day one starter. But I think Criswell has the most potential of that group.
I mean, I'm hearing some buzz about Jefferson. Some people really liking him, but I just feel like he's going to have a really, really good year to jump in NFL minds. I don't see a lot of buzz on the NFL side for him. I know people like him in college, and I've seen some people like, hey, could he be possibly a Cam Newton type. I just think he's going to have to make a major jump this year in college to get that Devy NFL hype. I think he's a good player. I definitely like him in C2C or CFF leagues for sure. But I just think you're going to have to see an all-world season out of him. I don't know if Arkansas has that in them, but I think you're going to have him have just a monster year to really jump up Devy board. If I'm taking a Devy draft, it's maybe because I'm swinging for the fences late and he's kind of fall. And I hope he has that big year, but I wouldn't be taking him, counting on him that he's going to be, a first or second round pick next year, and he's going to be a guy that I'm going to be plugging in on my NFL roster anytime soon.
I'll hand it to Arkansas. I think they bring in a very intriguing type of athlete at virtually every position. If you look at the guys that they're usually recruiting and look at the three quarterbacks we mentioned here, I mean, Jefferson Singleton, who was, for all intents and purposes, a running back in high school for much of the time with how they used him. And then Criswell is fairly athletic as well. I don't believe in any of these guys, quite frankly. I think this offense might take a step forward with Criswell. I don't think he's as good of a player as Jefferson, but I do think he can do quarterback things within structure a little better than Jefferson can. So I'm interested when they finally make that transition, what that looks like. But Jefferson can play 2 more years if he wants it. Like there's a non-zero chance that he's there for 2 more years, and they continue to run him out there. So I'm probably avoiding like the plague, but I do think, I mean, Jefferson, he's probably the closest like mover to Cam Newton. Like if you overlaid them, they run very, very similarly. It's kind of eerie at times.
Not nearly the arm strength though.
No.
All right, well, let's move on to their running backs, because here's the main event for them. Raheem Sanders obviously is the guy there. Rashad Dubinion and Isaiah Augustave, they're also there. Outside of Sanders, which we all know Sanders is potentially RB1, potentially. What do you have to say about these other 2 guys?
Man, I didn't know much about Isaiah Gustave, at first until we had the associate, and I looked at his tape, man. This kid is fast, like really fast, so it's going to be interesting to see him in there, and I think that's really a guy to look forward to outside of Raheem. I mean, to me, Raheem's the RB1 in your Devy board right now. I think he's just a strong runner. I've been on him for the past couple of years. But, what's behind him is interesting. Rashad Dubinion, also a great running back. He's just not as explosive as I saw with Isaiah, but he's smart. It looks like he's patient with his runners, sees where the block is, and then makes the moves to get to that hole. Where Isaiah, I mean, he's just going to beat you with that speed. He's just going to run straight up the middle and he's gone. You blink and he's done. But I think, Raheem's he's the main target. He's going to get all the carries, barring any setback or anything from him. But I do like what they're building, but it'll be hard to replace Raheem once he's gone.
Yeah, most definitely. Sanders is a lot of people's RB1. He's my RB1 in Devy also. There's just so much value there with him. You're probably looking at taking him within the first, I don't know, 4 or 5 picks in the startup Devy draft. So that's really all that needs to be said about their running back room. I think after he's gone, they're going to kind of have to go after somebody else. Try to bring in some talent there. Wide receivers, I don't like what they have. They got Sategna and Sam Mbake, but I don't see a whole lot of talent there in that wide receiver room.
I like Sategna. I was interested. I thought he might get a little more run last year as a freshman, and then didn't. I wasn't sure. I can't remember if he was banged up at all. But he's a guy going in this year that, he put up crazy numbers in high school. I think he maybe led the nation in average yards per game. It was some crazy stat like that. But I'm really interested in him. He was kind of a hot name coming out last year as a freshman, and I kind of seen him dipped. I haven't seen many people talking about him as much this year as last year. So if I'm going to buy on him, this is probably when I'm doing it, just because so many people are pumped about the new freshman class. There are some other freshmen wideout that kind of hit decently last year, and he's the guy that kind of got forgotten in the mix. So he's definitely, if I'm in any kind of startup or do somewhere where maybe it's a small Devy and he didn't get drafted in a Devy, he's maybe a guy I'm eyeing late. We did, there's a lot of risk there, like you said, but he's just a guy that performed a lot, and I don't see a lot else in that room. So he's a guy that if I am going to take a shot on a Devy wide receiver from Arkansas, he'd be the guy I'd be jumping on, just because I think the value is even better this year than it was last year, just because the name, he's kind of lost a little bit of that luster because he didn't come out and hit right away.
It's the same thing as the quarterback room in Bama, right? With this quarterback room, it's like these wide receivers might take a dip because that quarterback play might not be there. And so it's going to be hard to judge them. They may go 5th, 6th undrafted, so it's just going to be watching. To me, like a Rakeem Jarrett last year. I loved him as a wide receiver, but he had a horrible quarterback, so it's one of those where you have to look outside of what they're doing to get open in the field. It's kind of what they make after the catch, their playmaking abilities to kind of set them apart from other receivers.
You got any thoughts on these wide receivers, Austin?
Not really. I mean, he was banged up last year. I don't know how much of that factored into his lack of playing time. He got snaps in the bowl game, which was nice, and I think he had a catch or two. He's kind of a poor man's Antonio Williams. Like, I don't know that they're that dissimilar as players. Obviously, very different freshman years, but I'm not completely counting him out, but it's looking a little grim for him right now. Yeah,
sure.
So I did do another Devy trade just in the Dynasty calculator, and this one's interesting. Raheem Sanders is the RB1, right? So I'm trying to acquire him at all costs. Raheem Sanders for Miles Sanders and Will Levis. What do y'all think about that?
Give me Raheem all day long, baby. Give me Raheem for that. I'll throw another one. I'll throw something else on top of that and get Raheem if I can.
Yeah, Miles Sanders is okay, but Levis is garbage.
You know me, I'm a Levis hater. I always have been. So I don't have any Levis to trade, but if I had Levis, I'd be trading him at all costs.
I don't want him on my team at all unless he's like my quarterback 5.
Hey, Malik Willis is getting some buzz now, in the KF, so it might be time to trade Levis if you do have him anyways.
All right, well, let's move on to their tight ends here. We got the North Texas transfer Varkey's Gums, and then another younger tight end, Luke Haas. I think Gums has decent upside. He just kind of seems a little flighty to me. With the whole committing to Arkansas, backing off of it, and then recommitting there, I'm not sure what his actual commitment to playing is. That kind of scares me off of him a little bit.
I think Haas is the better player, but he's also 6'3", 226. So, yeah. I mean, it's
smallish. Yeah.
And unless he's Brock Bowers, which I am skeptical of, I don't see much of a future there either. Yeah.
I think Bowers is potentially one of the best tight end prospects of all time. So that's just me. It's not just me; it's a lot of people. But
I love Bowers. So
yeah, Bowers is special in my opinion. Well, let's get off of Arkansas here and move on to an even less compelling team, and that's Auburn. I don't see a whole lot here outside of maybe a couple of their running backs with Jarquez Hunter and Jeremiah Cobb. Their quarterback room is rather uninspiring. Their wide receivers, outside of Caleb Burton, who transferred in from Ohio State, I don't see much there I like. I know that they brought in Shane Hooks and they brought in Jair Shorter, and then the tight end Rivaldo Fairweather. But their main guy, I think, in my opinion, is Jeremiah Cobb.
I mean, I'm not sure why Caleb Burton transferred here. It threw me way off. I'm like, so I understand wanting to play, but then he goes to a place with like some of the worst quarterback play. And recently, Peyton Thorne transfers there, and he wasn't good where he was at before, even though he was starting. I don't want anybody on this team I mean, if I had to take a Devy, because we're just taking Devy guys, I mean, Hunter's probably playable. Cobb maybe in a C2C, format CFF, but man, I don't want anything to do with this Auburn offense. It scares me. I just don't think they're going to be very good this year. I don't like most of these guys, and I just think it's going to be tough for them to perform to get good value, at least as far as Devy's concerned.
Hugh Freeze has a lot of work to do there.
Yeah. I literally, I don't want to use the word hate. I really don't value any of the players that are listed here. And it's not like I have a list of guys to replace them with that are better. The only guy that I think, Damari Alston, is probably, I think, factors in at running back, especially if Jarquez Hunter is suspended or gone, as seems like could be a possibility. Go Google it. I'm not talking about it here. But I don't like any of the rest of these guys at all. Burton can't stay healthy. Battie is like 165 soaking wet. I think Cobb has some real deficiencies in his game in terms of being able to actually rush between the tackles. I don't like any of these guys. So we'll see what they bring in 2024. They have got Walker White as a quarterback coming in. I think he's a good Hugh Freeze QB. I don't know. Auburn's going to be bad. Auburn and Florida, their two teams are just going to be bad this year in the SEC.
What do you think about your boy Jared Palmgren pitching Riley Leonard transferring to Auburn the other day on this podcast?
I heard that, and I was like, I mean, is it a better situation than Duke? If you're staying somewhere 4 years, might as well just take the Duke degree, Yeah. I don't know that it's closer to home, which is cool. But no, I wouldn't sign anybody up for that. Maybe somebody, my worst enemy, but nobody else, I don't think.
Yeah, at this point, I mean, stay at Duke. I think he's got a better shot at Duke. And actually, I think he's probably helps him that, Daniel Jones is in the league and they've actually had some pretty good QB play the last couple of years. I'd rather be on a Duke team that is surprisingly decent than a really bad Auburn team. So I wouldn't suggest that move for him at all. I'd rather be a surprise threat on a Duke team that is, people are happy that they go over 500, and as opposed to an Auburn team who's going to probably get worked most of the season.
Well, especially going, if he were to transfer to Auburn, he would get pretty exposed in the SEC, whereas the ACC is a pretty bad conference. A lot of bad defenses there. He can kind of take advantage of that. SEC is a whole different animal, though.
These are definitely guys I'd rather take the dart throws on C2C leagues than I will on Devy leagues. It's like your Jarquez Hunter, he averages over 6 yards per carry last 2 seasons. He'll get you some points in C2C. But as far as Devy, right now, I don't see any NFL promise in anybody. So it's not so I'm avoiding Auburn, as a whole.
Yep.
Unless Caleb Burton comes out and says, hey, I got drafted selected to Ohio State for a reason. I'm a top receiver. Maybe, but I don't see it happening right now.
Sure. All right, let's move off Auburn and, their dregs there. Let's move on to another big time program, LSU. I actually really like where LSU is as far as talent. Jaden Daniels he's an improving quarterback. Garrett Nussmeier, I think, probably has better NFL value. And then you got freshman Ricky Collins coming in. What do you guys think about those quarterbacks?
I'll jump in. I think, Daniels, obviously, C2C, CFF is a better play. I just, watching his tape, seeing him, I just don't see where he fits in an NFL offense. To me, I just don't love him. Like I said, I think Nussmeier might have a better, heavy outlook than Daniels. I just don't see it with Daniels. I think he's going to be a solid college quarterback, but I just don't see the appeal at the NFL level at all for him.
Yeah.
It's one of those where the quarterbacks, I feel, have the talent around them. So, it's one of those, don't get fooled, right, by thinking, oh, this is a great quarterback just because the wide receivers are making the plays, and I think that's going to be very important, especially for a team like LSU. If they have success, right, you always talk up the quarterback and, oh, they're doing this great thing. But is it actually him doing these great things, or is it just these wide receivers making these great catches, or this running back just, catching a screenplay or anything like that? So I I like them, like JT said, maybe in a C2C, but Devy, I think they're the tricksters. They're the guys that they might look good, but it's really, in reality, just the weapons around them.
He was really appealing after his freshman year because he was really aggressive downfield, and he completed a decent percentage of them. So it was kind of one of those, well, if he can figure out how to do some of the other things, I like that aggressiveness. And he just really has never figured it out. His accuracy on a lot of those timing routes, especially stuff to kind of the perimeter that isn't deep, isn't like a bucket shot. You've really got to fire it in there on deeper outs and stuff. He just can't hit those, and he struggles with timing on some interior stuff. And if you're late on that, I mean, it's going the other way for 6. So yeah, I really thought that there could be something there. Jaden Rashada actually reminds me a lot of him, so I'm really interested to see what he does at Arizona State over the next couple of years. But it's one of those where they have to make that jump really, but the second or third year, and he did not, unfortunately, make it. I like Nussmeier a lot, actually. I have him stashed like everywhere. I think he's going to be a really, really good player. But
yeah, he was really from all reports, he was really, really good at the Manning Passing Academy this past week. So
I think he's going to fit perfectly what they want too. Like they're going to be a good team this year because Daniels can run, but they're going to unleash Nussmeier the year after that. And don't be surprised if they are averaging 35 a game the following year through the air, like basically all through the air, because I think Nussmeier can drive that kind of an offense. And I don't think they have a guy there, especially if Neighbors leaves on the boundary, but they've got a bunch of guys that are okay that I think can all chip in.
Well, I think on the boundary, Shelton Sampson Jr. can end up being that guy. He's kind of that long, lanky guy who's able to run. Neighbors, I think is a little bit hurt because of Jalen Daniels' inability to get him the ball, and I think that really killed Bote last year too. Was the fact that Neighbors the fact that Daniels just couldn't throw him the ball. All right, their running back situation is really, kind of cluttered here. You got Noah Kane, you got John Emery Jr., and then you got a couple guys who they brought in. They brought in Logan Diggs from Notre Dame, transfer from Notre Dame, had a really, really solid year last year as Notre Dame's number 2. And then they bring in a couple freshmen, Caleb Jackson and Trey Holly. What do you guys think about Caleb Jackson and Trey Holly there?
I love Caleb Jackson. Mm-hmm. I think he's lightning to anyone's thunder. He's quick, he's efficient, he knows how to make the cuts, but he necessarily doesn't need to. He's fast, he's agile, he has good footwork to adjust accordingly to see the holes with some good vision, whether it's behind the line or going to the outside and bursting off with his speed. So I think he's the running back I want to look at right now when I'm trying to acquire some Devy assets. Logan Diggs is nice. I think this is an opportunity for him to possibly get the starting gig and be the head honcho here. But he's just a strong runner. He's fast. He can give you a stiff arm and make some good plays, has some good vision. We saw that at Notre Dame. And to me, it would be like Logan Diggs and Caleb Jackson, I think, could be a nice one too, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm a big Caleb Jackson guy. I like him. If I'm going Devy, just straight Devy, I probably want to take the chance on Jackson first. I think Diggs could be solid. I mean, they've produced really good running backs over the years, LSU has, and has some just decent guys in their systems. I'm just not sure what I see him at the next level. But I like Caleb Jackson. Like you said, I like his speed, the way they're getting guys involved. They can figure out a way to get him involved a little bit in the passing game, kind of show get some of that speed on the outside. I like him. So he's probably the Devy asset I'm looking at the most in that backfield.
I agree, but mark my words, if Logan Diggs is healthy all year, he runs for at least 1,100 yards at LSU.
I agree.
I don't even know if that's a hot take.
Jared
he came back from shoulder injury last year and still ran for 850. Like, I think he's just a good player.
Yeah. Jared kind of called me out the other night on the on the best ball draft, asking my thought process on taking Diggs in the 10th round. And I was like, well, he had a really good year last year. He was probably Notre Dame's best running back, and he transfers to a place that needs a number 1 running back. So I think he's going to have a really big year.
Oh yeah, best ball CFF. I love that pick. For sure.
10 catches last year for over 200 yards too. Like, it's not like he's just a thumper. Like, I think, you know, at least for college, he has a 3-down skill set. We'll see if that would translate to the NFL. I think he could be a 4th or 5th round NFL draft pick. I think he could easily slot in there.
I think so too. Well, let's move on to their wide receivers. They got a ton of them. We've already talked about about a couple of them. There's Malik Neighbors. He's their number one. He's probably a top 6-7 Devy wide receiver overall. And then you're looking at guys like Brian Thomas Jr., Aaron Anderson, Chris Hilton, and then you got freshmen Shelton Sampson Jr., Jalen Brown, Kyle Parker, and then senior Kyron Lacey also. I think all these guys have potential. My favorite outside of Neighbors is Shelton Sampson Jr. though. Just watching him run, he looks like a gazelle out there.
I think I'm the lowest man on the planet in Malik Neighbors. And I don't even hate him. I just don't love the guy. I don't know that he does anything great. I think he's good at a couple things. He's not super explosive for his size and his skill set. I don't know if that's a good, like, I don't know how well that'll work for him. I have him as my wide receiver 14, but there are 4 or 5 freshmen I would rather have than him. And you know, the class after that, I like guys like Tet McMillan. I like, Barry Brown over him. Like, I just don't know what his like trump card is when he gets to the NFL. Like, what is he going to beat you with if things aren't going perfectly for him? And I don't know that he has like a thing. So I'm a little skeptical on Neighbors. I really, really am. I think if you have him, I think he's definitely a sell, because I think you can sell him for a pretty hefty amount right now. I think you could get a legit NFL starting wide receiver from a guy trying to rebuild. Yeah,
you probably could. I have him as my wide receiver 8 in my rankings. And in this class, I think let me see. In this class, I have him as my wide receiver 4 in this upcoming class. So
just speaking, because you would try to trade him, I have a trade up here: Malik Neighbors and Logan Diggs for Traylon Burks. Would you acquire Burks for Neighbors?
Yeah, I would take Burks. So I would probably take Burks straight up for him, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. I like Neighbors, but the places I have Neighbors in, I got him in leagues where he kind of fell. It's like I didn't take him too high anywhere, and that's why I liked him. The fact that a lot of the smaller wide receivers went high in this year's draft gave me a little hope on Neighbors. Like, okay, maybe they're not going to worry that he's not huge, he's not super fast. I mean, I don't like him as much as Jordan Addison. I like Jordan Addison a lot more than I like Neighbors, just as a wide receiver altogether. I like him, but I'm definitely, like you said, I'm not overspending for him. And if somebody really does like him and I can trade him, I'm probably moving him. I do like the upside. Daniels does make me worry what his NFL draft stock will be, is what kind of season he has. And again, I don't think he's that guy that's going to blow people away at the combine. So if he doesn't have a big season and then has an okay combine, what is that going to look like for him and his draft stock? If he's not putting up 105 catches and 1,000-yard seasons and 10 touchdowns, if he just has an average combine, where does that drop him? That's what I'm worried about. I like the player in general. I like him as a player, but like you said, I don't know if he has any elite skill that puts him over other guys. So I think he needs to have a pretty good year. And then maybe if he has a pretty high-end year with Daniels not playing fantastic, I think maybe you get those people who say, hey, I mean, look what he did with Jaden Daniels at QB. I mean, he put up those kind of numbers. I think that would lead, to him maybe get higher draft capital. But like you said, I like him, and I have him in a lot of places, but I got him in a lot of places where I got him at really nice values. I didn't overdraft him too high.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I mean, because, LSU is used to be one of the premier wide receiver, colleges. You got Jefferson and Chase coming out, and now we're getting a bunch of guys where it's like, okay, not everyone is these 2 elite guys, right? And now we have to adjust them to say, okay, now look at this wide receiver room, and we have to do a little bit more digging to see what they can bring to the table, because both those guys were just phenomenal athletes when they came out and everyone was high on them. Maybe not as much as Justin Jefferson, but he took the lead by storm. So now we have to say, okay, is Neighbors really going to be an alpha? Is he going to take that next step? And it could be, again, it could be the quarterback value that kind of dips him. But at the same time, this is his chance to make the play because it's not all about the quarterback. It's going to be about the receivers there as well.
Well, this is kind of me taking a victory lap here. I actually had Justin Jefferson as my wide receiver 1 in that draft. So, you know.
Nice.
I don't think many people did, but I did. Matter of fact, we were doing a bunch of mock drafts that year, and me and Bob Miller, JT and SC know him. We were talking about it, and I specifically told him, I said, all these guys are good. Jerry Jeudy's okay, he's good. But Justin Jefferson is the best wide receiver in this draft. You know, little victory lap there. I will take that all day.
I wish you would have told me that before my rookie drafts that year. That's for sure. I went back and looked at some of those rookie drafts this last year. They popped up on my memories on my phone, and I'm like, man, I blew some picks that I could have had Justin Jefferson, and then I totally ignored him for Jerry Jeudy and other guys, and I'm like, oh, that one hurts. That one hurts bad.
Can Samson be the wide receiver 1 in his class, to talk about another guy other than Neighbors? I mean, I know, Tommy, you were saying you like him.
I like him. There's a ton of other freshman wide receivers in this class that I like better than him. Freshman. As far as this freshman class, I've got Samson as the I've got him as wide receiver 9 in this class.
That sounds close to where I have him. I'm trying to pull up my final thing, and I will admit, I think Samson for me this year, I have him at 8. Was it very much like a hedge ranking just because of where the services had him? Mm-hmm. Because I know he's got good measured speed and all those things, but I always watch him and I was like, it takes this guy a little while to get the top gear. Like, I don't know what this guy is, again, like what's his elite skill. I don't know.
He's fluid. He's very fluid.
So I don't think they have anything coming in next year to look super appealing. So he's going to get a legitimate shot here. Mm-hmm. But I think he's real boom or bust. I think either he turns out to be really, really good, or he's just nothing. I don't think there's going to be much in between for a guy like Samson. So I'm interested to see what he does. And they don't have another guy that can do what he does on the roster, which, again, we're talking earlier about skill sets. You know, does this guy do something nobody else can do? I think he can. So I think that's going to help him at least get some opportunity early.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely like him. Like I said, I have him as the wide receiver 9 in this class. I kind of have him and Lee Cock kind of run that same range.
I have him in a big group of guys that are more athlete than receiver, like Lee Cock, Cordell Russell, Hakeem Williams. Yeah. Those guys are all within 4 or 5 spots of each other, and it's
those guys are all kind of bunched in together for me too.
Yeah.
Moving on to tight end, probably my favorite tight end outside of Brock Bowers, and that's really that really personally hurts me to say that Brock Bowers is my favorite tight end in this class, just because I'm a Tennessee fan and I hate everything about Georgia. But my favorite tight end outside of Bowers is Mason Taylor. This guy has everything you're looking for in a tight end. He's got good size. He's got great athleticism. He's got good hands, can run routes, very controlled at the point of the catch. And he's got the pedigree. I mean, look who his dad is, a Hall of Famer. So I don't know what there isn't to like about Mason Taylor, and I think people are way too low on him.
Tommy, I think this is a guy me and you, I think, are in agreement in. I love Mason Taylor as well. He's the guy that I'm grabbing everywhere behind Bowers. There was a couple leagues I was in, C2C and some Devies and stuff. Obviously he didn't get taken as a freshman, where I've been all over him this year. I I just like the skill set. I think it's so hard to figure out what any of these tight ends can be at the next level in college. It's just very difficult. So when you see a guy like Taylor pop early, that gives me hope that, like, oh, this guy is gonna be in the mix his whole career. He's not gonna be one of those guys that are gonna try to figure it out his junior or senior year. Yeah, I'm with you on him. I'm probably outside of Bowers, especially for cost. I'm taking Mason Taylor as my second tight end over even some guys that are ranked ahead of him. Might get higher drafted this next year, but for Devy purposes, I want Mason Taylor. If I'm going for a tight end, he's my guy.
Yeah, definitely.
I've got him at tight end 8. I won't argue that much with anything you guys just said. I think there's a big group after Bowers and probably JT Sanders that you can mix and match, and he's squarely in that category. And like you said, I kind of like these guys that have a dad that was really, really good. Like, it doesn't always work out. I mean, look at Michael Jordan's kids, but I think more often than not, they've had the training, the weight, the weight, and just kind of the watching somebody else learn how to be a pro so that they can apply to themselves maybe a couple years earlier than other guys are. I think that really, really counts, especially in football, where you don't get a lot of years to kind of show it. They'll replace you real quick. So I like that for a guy like Mason Taylor. I think I could see a day 2 pick there. I wonder what his 40 and stuff is. I don't think he's unathletic. I'm just curious what his high end athleticism potential is. I really don't know.
I would venture to say he probably runs in the right around 4.6, 4.65, okay. Which I think is very, very fast for a tight end. Obviously, it's not Brock Bowers who's going to run probably sub 4.5, but 4.6, 4.65 is pretty outstanding for an incoming tight end, I think. Another couple tight ends there, couple incoming freshmen, Kamorian Pimpton and Mac Markway. Pimpton is more your receiving tight end, and Markway is more of a blocker. I do like Pimpton. He's obviously going to have to wait, a couple years, and until Taylor's gone, to really be overly productive, and for people to be able to see what he can do. But I think Pimpton has the potential.
I like Pimpton. I like Markway a lot. He doesn't really have the receiving profile right now, but if he can somehow, get in that room with Taylor and Pimpton and see how those guys catch and work on it, he's got great size as a freshman. He's just a really big dude, good blocker. And my question for him is if he can kind of figure out how to work in that passing game into his repertoire. He's a guy that at the NFL level, could he be kind of a poor man's Michael Mayer? Could he be that type of guy if he could figure out his receiving game? Because he's got that body, that size, and ability. So he's someone that right now I probably wouldn't go crazy after at all, but he's a guy I'm definitely keeping my eye on to see, as especially if Mason Taylor blows up, ends up going high in the next year or two in the draft, is a guy like Markway going to get a little bit more chance, seeing as they use their tight end well in LSU and kind of prove that system, as you see with Georgia, how well it's worked for them. You get guys in the room with each other. They just kind of build off each other. So he's a guy that right now I wouldn't be jumping all over, but he's somebody that's on my radar that I'm keeping an eye out for the future. Just for that, especially, like talking Devy or C2C, where a guy could end up, being that guy in the NFL just because he's got all the size. So I like Markway for that reason.
Sure. All right, let's kick off of LSU here and move on to our next school. We're going to move on to Ole Miss. They have a sneaky amount of talent here down there in Oxford. Quarterback wise, you're looking Jackson Dart, and I actually like Walker Howard quite a bit there. I think he may have more raw skill than what Jackson Dart does.
I'm a big Walker Howard guy. I loved him when he originally went to LSU. I was jumping all over him where I could get him. I was a little surprised to see him up and just transfer to. I mean, if he was going to transfer somewhere where he thought he'd have a chance to start right away. Obviously, going to Ole Miss with Jackson Dart there doesn't really give him a great shot to start this year. But if he can hold on one more year and possibly win the job next year, I actually like Walker Howard a lot. I think he's got a lot of skill. I like him on Ole Miss. With that offense, and they just keep adding players around him. So he's a guy that I'm taking in a lot of leagues. I'm holding him. He's gonna probably drop in a little people's eyes just because he hasn't got any starts over this next year or two. But I'm a big Walker Howard guy.
I don't like either of them a lot, but I do think that Lane Kiffin is one of the best coaches in the country at kind of adapting an offense to what he has in front of him in any given year. So I do think no matter what, he'll get the most that he possibly can. If he rolls out Jackson Dart week 1, they'll get the most that they can out of Jackson Dart. If it's Spencer Sanders, who isn't a Devy guy, there's no reason for us to really talk about him. He'll get the most out of Spencer Sanders. And then obviously if it's Walker Howard, I have full faith that he'll do that. But I don't think individually I particularly love any of those guys at this point. The one thing you can say for Howard is that if he doesn't play this year, again, there's no value lost there. So that it's got some nice insulated value there.
Sure. All right, moving on to the running backs. Quinshon Judkins obviously is their stud there. Behind him, Kedrick Riscano, freshman coming in. What do you guys think about him?
I'm here to tell you the good word about Kedrick Riscano.
There you go.
I am going door to door, Bible in hand. I love Kedrick Riscano. He was my RB6 in this freshman class. I think he gets playing time this year because Ulysses Bentley's there, whatever. That's a speed bump. Realistically for a guy like Riscano, who has a full 3-down skill set, if he's not 200 pounds, he's extremely close to it at this particular moment. So I have full faith that 210 is not going to be an issue for him. He's got some frame. He really has juice. I watched the full Polynesian Bowl, and he was excellent at that game, and his tape is very, very good as well. The big thing about him is that he's a really good pass catcher. Like, he's probably one of the better pass catching backs, but not just a pass catcher in this class. I think that he ends up being the guy that spells Judkins at times. And I fully think it would not shock me if he has 20 to 25 catches as a freshman, just because that's what he can do on a field. And they're going to put him in those obvious situations where he can catch dump offs and screens, and you can scheme him open a little bit and get him open in some space. And he's pretty good in the open field too. So I like him a lot. I think he's a guy that is not perceived in the same group as Ruben Owens, and Cam Seldon has more athletic upside, but there's enough uncertainty that I think he gets kind of knocked into this category. And then Riscano's right there with him.
Cam Seldon's never really played running back though either. He was a wide receiver who's transitioning. So
yeah. So I mean, I think those are after the top 2 or 3 guys in the class. I think those guys are right there. And I just don't hear anybody talking about Riscano at all. And I'm happy to scoop him up everywhere this offseason if I can.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I like where your head's out on him because, I'm not seeing him talked about anywhere almost. I mean, at all. And obviously, Ole Miss has proven that they can make multiple running backs valuable. I mean, I'm a huge Judkins guy. I mean, most people are. I love him. But I think Riscano is sneaky good value right now, depending on what kind of draft you're in, or Devy or C2C. I just think he's sneaky good because he is the guy that's probably one of the higher rated guys that is kind of fallen by the wayside. Like you said, people just are not talking about him as much as they are those top 3, 4, 5 guys in this freshman class.
Yep. All right, let's get along here to wide receiver. They bring in a couple of transfers here. Trey Harris and Zachary Franklin. I actually think Trey Harris has the most NFL upside there of those two. I like Franklin as a college receiver. I just don't think he's quite has that it factor and skill set that Trey Harris does. Also, they have J.J. Henry, who I think has a possibility of being pretty good, and then incoming freshman Aiden Williams. I think Aiden Williams is going to be a stud by the time he leaves Ole Miss.
I'm really interested to see what happens with this group. In a lot of C2C leagues and a lot of CFF leagues, I have a lot of Trey Harris and Zachariah Franklin. And just really interesting because we've seen some of these guys who've gone from kind of the lower level up on the transfers and kind of proven themselves and raised their draft stock. And we've seen a lot of guys get buried. All of a sudden they transferred up thinking they were going to be like, oh, I'm going to, raise my draft stock, and they can't even get on the field at some of these other schools. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see if these guys can separate themselves at all as far as Devy is concerned. I think they're going to have good seasons as far as CFF or C2C. I like having both of them on my team. But as far as Devy is concerned, you've heard their names, but it hasn't been, people aren't like talking about them as like, oh, first, second, third round picks. They're like, yeah, maybe they're a fourth, fifth, sixth rounder. It'll be really interesting in this offense just because it can be a really powerful offense if Jackson Dart can pull it all together this year. It'll be interesting to see how these guys make that transition. I'm here for it. I'm definitely going to keep an eye on both these guys because they could shoot up Devy draft boards. But yeah, you're definitely, if you're jumping into a Devy and taking them now, there's a lot of risk there. A lot of risk to see if they can produce at the level they did it at some smaller schools. But I'm definitely interested in seeing if they both can make that transition.
Then at tight end here, we have Caden Prescorn, who's the transfer from Memphis, big target, and then Michael Trigg, who was everybody's kind of tight end darling last year that really didn't do much for them. He's done a lot in their spring games, but when it comes to actually putting it together on the field, regular season, in game, he just didn't do much last year. What do you guys think about these two guys?
5 words for you: Michael Trigg, post-hype sleeper. Maybe. I mean, he's athletic. He hasn't lost that part of it that we liked. Sure. I think he got injured early last year, which is kind of what set him off on the wrong foot. So I don't play like really any deep Devy, like to the point where I'm really considering tight end at all. It's just it's generally not a format that I get into too much. But in a C2C, I think Trigg went from being a 3rd or 4th round startup pick last year to a guy that's going round 10 plus. Mm-hmm. And really, the situation hasn't changed. I mean, they brought in Prescorn, but we could see some 2 tight end stuff out of Ole Miss this year. And nothing's really happened to Trigg. So I think that he's a wise investment in deeper formats. Because I think if somebody has him, they're really disappointed in him, and they're probably selling him cheap, and you can draft him pretty cheap this year.
Yeah, I mean, there may be even people who completely dropped him off their roster if they're, say they can only have 10 guys on their Devy roster. They may have already dropped him.
Yeah, if you're in a C2C where most likely you're not going to get a lot of points out of your tight end anyway, unless you have one of the absolute top guys like a Bowers. But you transition to your NFL side where you're maybe a start 2 tight end or a pretty big tight end premium. He's worth a guy stashing for me, just because even if he doesn't prove it at this level, I think tight end's the least prove it position in college for me. I think guys can go the NFL and be really good NFL players without having great college careers. I just think that the transition is depending on how teams use you and everything else. So he's definitely a guy. If people have fallen off on him, the hype has definitely dropped on him. I love him if you can get him at his current value, or if you got somebody who's willing to trade him and you got room to stash him. I like what Austin said there. I'm in on that as well.
Sure. All right, moving on to our next school, we got Mississippi State. There's not really a whole lot here to talk about. We can run over some names if you guys want to, but outside of guys like Will Rogers, who doesn't really have a whole lot of NFL potential, I don't think. Jaquavius Marks is an okay pass-catching running back. I don't see a whole lot more to him than that. And then you got a couple wide receivers to keep an eye on: Jaden Wally, Creed Whitmore. Outside of that, do you guys have anything to say about any of these guys, or can we just move on from here?
I'll just say a quick thing about Jaquavis Marks. I mean, he's obviously been involved in the passing game a lot there. I don't think he has huge Devy upside. I don't know why if you're in a Devy league you would even have him, to be honest. I haven't been a couple C2C teams. I think he feels like that he's a 5th, 6th, maybe 7th round draft pick, and just the fact that I think a team is going to take a shot on him as a 3rd down back just because of his receiving profile. I don't think he ever is a starting running back in the NFL by any means, but could he kind of be a poor man's Neon Hines? Could he do something like that? I think there's the possibility just because of how many receptions he's had in college. I think somebody at the NFL is going to give him a shot. So that's my talk on him. Pretty much, I just think he's got enough. He's shown enough receiving skill that I could see someone using him at the NFL level.
The big problem is we don't know what this offense is going to look like at all this year.
Right.
You know, making such probably it seems like a huge shift from everything Mike Leach did to whatever. It sounds like it's going to be a little more run heavy. So it's just tough to invest in something when you have really no idea what it was. And the former offense was so, I don't want to call it gimmicky, but kind of specific in terms of what it was asking players to do within it, that we don't know if they can do anything else. So it just makes it really, really difficult to even feel like, is Will Rogers even a good quarterback? Like, he was pretty good at running the air raid. Does that mean he's a good quarterback outside of that? We haven't seen a lot of those guys really function outside of that. So it's just, I feel bad for everybody involved with Mississippi State's program because you kind of were building up something and now you're just like, there's no real replacement. You have to just totally switch gears, and that really sets you back a couple of years from where you thought you were headed.
I actually thought when all that was happening that that Tyson Helton would have been the natural call, and when he wasn't, and then they went with Zach Arnett, that was kind of like, what are they doing? You know. Looking at Will Rogers, you know, I mentioned Tyson Helton. I kind of see Will Rogers as being Austin Reed. You know, I think Austin Reed probably has a little bit bigger arm, but at the same time, I mean, Will Rogers is about 1,000 yards away from breaking the SEC career yardage record. So, I mean, he's a good quarterback. I don't think he has much of an NFL future, though.
Yeah, just to quickly go down Mark's numbers, and again, maybe they don't throw in the ball, but the guy had 60 catches for 268, 83 for 502, and 48 for 288. So he's caught a ton of passes, but again, is that because of the system they set him up in? You know, it's going to be interesting. I think somebody takes a shot on him. But again, in a Devy, I'm not taking him in a Devy draft. But it'll just be interesting to see because of that receiving profile. And he's run for 312, 416, and 582 in his 3 years. So he's been putting up close to 1,000 yards total per season, anywhere from 800 to 1,000 yards. So he's a guy I'm interested. But obviously that would be a late draft pick. Someone I'm throwing a dart at in a rookie draft next year, probably. And unless you're just in the deepest of deep Devy leagues, I don't think you'd have a Devy shot. But if you're looking for a late guy that might end up on a team as a 3rd down back, he would be the one guy I'd keep an eye on.
Sure. All right, let's move on to our final team of the evening. We got the Texas A&M Aggies. I think that they have quite a bit of talent here. You're looking at quarterback Connor Wigman is a pretty big time Devy asset. Reuben Owens and Le'Veon Moss at running back, and then you got Evan Stewart there at wide receiver, who most people love also. What do you guys think about A&M's team?
I really like Connor Wegman. Actually, I have him as my QB7 in my Devy rankings, above Cade Klubnik, just because I think he has a few more tools than Klubnik does. I am really hoping that I don't know if unleash is the right word, but kind of take some of the training wheels off and let Wegman, you just kind of throw him out there and just let him kind of work himself out of trouble. He's pretty good in and out of structure. So, don't be afraid to run some RPO stuff and roll him out and just kind of, let him buy some time at times. I I think there's a legit chance that after this year, we're talking about him as a top 5 quarterback in college football. And quite frankly, I think A&M needs him to be. If he's mediocre, I think they're in for another long year, because I think the running backs are all kind of a year away. And the wide receivers outside of Stewart all really kind of do the same exact thing, which they're really hurting without Chris Marshall, who I think was kind of the only boundary, big-bodied guy that they could really depend on that team. So I really want to see what Weigman does this year. I think that if he is good, A&M wins 9 or 10 games. If he is average or below average, they're winning 6 or 7 again, and I think it's that simple for them.
Yeah, I've got Weigman as my QB 20 in Devy right now, and a lot of that was just because how bad he looked last year. I was expecting a little bit more from him, and when he didn't produce, then it kind of left a sour taste in my mouth a little bit. Bringing in Bobby Petrino, though, maybe that puts a little bit of a spark in that offense, and Connor Weigman can show his potential. You mentioned Chris Marshall. I was going to put him in that Ole Miss group, but of course, he's been kicked off. He's been kicked off that team, dismissed out of the program there too. So that kind of spelled the end right there with Chris Marshall for me. I don't see him ever getting another shot. That's 2 schools in 2 years who have told him bye. But as far as A&M goes, you got Weigman, Ruben Owens. I like. He is my RB3 in this freshman class. And then at wide receiver, it's Evan Stewart. I think Anaya Smith could do something. He's kind of a gadget guy. I think he may have a little bit of a future in the NFL. And then tight end, Donovan Green's okay. Jake Johnson's okay. It's just a lot of okay there.
Yeah, for me on Weigman, he just seems like a guy that people are really in or really out on. I've never had like one big feeling one way or the other on him, but it just seems like I can't decide if people don't like him or they don't like A&M and they don't like the system they've been running, and it's the system that they're more mad at than they are with Weigman. So he's definitely a guy, if you like him, I think he can be had for a decent price in some Devy leagues. Because I just see some leagues I'm in, and he goes so late. And I'm surprised at how late he is. And then other leagues, I see him where you got more SEC, A&M fans, and people take him a little earlier. So he's a guy that, like I said, Austin said, I think he's got huge potential. So if you're willing to take the risk on him and grab him, because if he does have a good season, I could see him jumping way up draft boards and Devy boards. Again, I don't have huge feelings on him either way. I think I was like Tommy, like you said, I was slightly disappointed in what I saw out of him last year, but I couldn't tell how much was him, how much it was coaching, situation. I don't know. So he's a guy I think is definitely going to be interested to see how he falls this year. Obviously, a lot of people love Ruben Owens. He's got that speed skill, could be great, especially. I mean, I think it's always recency bias, but if Devin Achane crushes for like Miami, is everybody also going to be on Ruben Owens going, bam, he's going to be Devin Achane? I don't know. I always think that. And then Evan Stewart, I think we talked about it, Tommy. Him and Luther Burden are like in that class. Those are my guys. I think that got them right. Yeah, I got Stewart right behind Luther Burden as my guy in that class. But it'd be nice to see if this offense can finally put it together and do what you think they would do with the talent they have. But that's going to be interesting to see what happens in A&M this year.
Sure.
The risky thing about drafting a guy like Weigman is that if he's bad this year, he loses all of his value.
Yep.
So
exactly. I think that's what you're saying. I think it's what you want to spend on him. How much are you willing to take that chance? Because he's a guy, if he has a great year, man, you might have just won the lottery on him. But yeah, you're right. If he plays bad again, it's like he's done. That's it. It's like no, you're never gonna get anything for him. So yeah, he's definitely a high risk, high reward guy, I think.
Yeah, it's a lot of the reason why I dropped him down considerably in my quarterback rankings there. You have him as your QB7. I've got him as my QB20. And in all reality, he's probably somewhere in the middle there. we just don't know what true Connor Wigman is right now, and until we find that out, it's like, do we want to take the shot on him really high, or do we want to try to wait on him and wait on him and wait on him, until the fourth round or so.
And how many quarterbacks in Devy do we even feel really good about right now? I think we feel really good about Caleb and Drake May.
Yeah.
And then I like Malachi Nelson and Dante Moore because they're going to high-powered offenses and probably don't lose any value this year. So there's a ton of insulation there. And then after that, I have literally questions about every quarterback. I think you can bump Drew Alar maybe up into that category, but then everybody else, like Quinn Ewers, if he's bad again, he's toast. Klubnik, there's some tools questions. McCord did not look good this spring. I mean, it's just boom, boom, boom down the list, and you can name like a major red flag for every single player. So it's just kind of managing, do I prefer this red flag? Do I prefer that red flag? Do I think, how does my league value quarterback? I think that matters a lot. So it's really almost just kind of a dealer's choice after you get outside those top 3, 4, 5 guys.
Yeah, because after that, you're looking at guys like, Joe Milton, Riley Leonard, Devin Brown, Nico Iamaleava, Jackson Arnold, guys that haven't seen the field or, like you said, have major questions on them. And I personally think a guy like Joe Milton in this next draft class, I think he's probably closer to QB3 than what he is to QB 5, 6, 7.
Yeah, I like Alar. Like you said, he's another guy I would throw in that top bit for me, just because I really like him. I think his skill set and just the size and everything. But I find myself, if I'm not getting one of those 5 guys, I've been waiting and just taking other positions and waiting to see who drops where. Because like I said, I could see Milton being blown up, having a monster year, be top 3 QB. I also could see him getting beat out and not even getting drafted. There's so much that can happen with some of these QBs. A guy I've been looking at, and I know we talked about it, Tommy, on our QB show, but sure, Sanders from Colorado is a guy I'm just kind of waiting to see if he drops. If somebody else takes him, then I'm like, okay, I'm not upset about it. But if he drops pretty far, I'd rather have a guy that has a couple years under his belt that has looked pretty good offense. Obviously, Colorado's probably going to be pretty bad, but they're going to have an offense going to be on the field throwing the ball around a lot. So I'd rather take a shot on a guy like him, I think, than some of these other guys, because there is just so much. I mean, we just looked back a couple years ago. Who were the guys everybody was grabbing as freshmen, sophomores, and that now are just completely off the radar, and you couldn't do anything with them. It changes that quick in college. It just changes so quickly. So outside of those top 4 or 5 guys, I'm really trying to draft other positions this year and hoping, like I said, I'm waiting for value. Want to see who gets to me later and kind of go there, because there is some of these guys that they value could go through the roof depending on how well they play this year, or they could completely be gone. I mean, it could be it for them, and so it's really tough. And I guess you gotta decide for yourself how much you're willing to take the risk on a few of these guys and how high you want to take them, just in case they do bomb out.
And the real unspoken thing that hasn't really been making the rounds yet is that next year's freshman quarterback class looks bad. So it's not like there's a lot of help coming next year. I mean, I think people like Dylan Raiola, and I think he's good, but I don't think he's a god, like some seem to imply. And then everybody else in that, like, it's saying is like steady is like what you can say about him. Like, he's kind of Cade Klubnik-ish, which is not a bad thing, but is he a guy that, lifts an offense? I don't exactly know. So there's not really help in the wings either. It's one of those where, like, honestly, if I'm in a pure Devy league this year, I'm probably going to try my darndest to get either Malachi Nelson or Dante Moore, and then I'm probably going to go try to find a guy who's rebuilding and has a pretty good at one NFL quarterback that he wants to shift, and see if I can buy that guy off of him with one of those two. That just seems like the safest strategy if I need another quarterback somewhere in my pipeline to go and try to do that, because otherwise I'm a 0 QB guy. I don't really touch them ever in Devy unless it's a Caleb Williams at a 101 type deal. It's just too much stuff can happen, and I think there's a lot of other ways to kind of string that value out without waiting 3 or 4 years and hoping that one of these guys ends up being good when the odds are not great for that.
Yeah, that's kind of why I'm in on taking some of these older guys prior to taking like a Jackson Arnold, just because, you know, if you draft a Joe Milton, you're gonna have to wait 1 year on him, and if he doesn't end up being anything, then, you know, fine, whatever, you move on. But with Jackson Arnold, you're having to roster him for the next 3 years at minimum there. So it's like, you know, I would rather take a shot on an older guy who is about to be draft eligible and see if that turns into anything, rather than take somebody, you know, that's not on the elite side, like maybe those first 3 or 4 freshman quarterbacks are.
Yeah, I always think, you know, you got to think about your league. If you're just playing pure Devy, I think I agree with you, Tommy. You got to do that. If you're in a C2C, you know, maybe you do take that younger guy because you're like, hey, I could get a couple years of production for him on my C2C side, on my college side. And then if he does blow up, now I got myself an NFL type quarterback. And if he doesn't, well, he gave me production for a couple years on C2C. So I always think that's, to me, I look at that quarterback completely different depending on if I'm a straight Devy league versus a C2C league, where I can maybe take that guy that's a little bit younger, and I'm going to hopefully get a couple good years out of him. If he blows up, he blows up, and I'm loving it. If he doesn't, okay, I'm back in the mix on somebody next year. But yeah, I'm like you guys. I don't take a lot of quarterbacks in pure Devy leagues. I just don't, because I feel like it changes. I mean, I've got teams where I look at some of the quarterbacks on my teams from 4 or 5 years ago that I took. I'm like, what was I doing? You know, I got like Slovis on my team. I got some of these guys are like, oh my God, now he's in year 5 or 6. And as a freshman at USC, everybody was loving him, and he went super high in Devy. And now we were like, oh, this guy's dead. He's never going to make it in the pros. So I don't want to make those mistakes again where I'm jumping on a guy too early, and then he sits on my roster for 4 years and absolutely has no shot to be an NFL quarterback.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, that finishes up our teams. Do you guys have any closing words? Tell us where we're able to find you guys.
Go ahead, JT.
You can find me at JT Orange on Twitter. I'm always here on the Devy Show with Tommy and SC. You can find me on my podcast, The Stew with JT Brew, on the DynastyPros Football channel. So I'm on that YouTube channel. You guys can always search me up on there. Do IDP, Dynasty Rankings, Devy, a little bit of everything. So I always tell people, if you hit me up with questions about anything, I play in every type of league you can think of for the most part. So, but yeah, hit me up there, JT Orange on Twitter, and then make sure you check out the Dynasty Pros Football website where you can find my podcasts, the ones I'm on, and also all the ones I guest on. And I'm also on the Commissioner Evaluation podcast with John McGlynn on the P2W Network. I co-host that show.
And I am Austin Nace at Devy Deets. Everything I do at campus2canton.com. I host our C2C show every week. I do Devy Debate. And other than that, I mean, yeah, just go YouTube podcast, go check them out. I think we probably have something for anybody who's interested in college football in some shape or form.
Awesome. Yeah, I 100% agree. Go to campus2canton.com. Check them out. They have a lot of great stuff there. A lot of great guys over there too. I didn't mention earlier, SC had to dip out. I believe he had to take his wife to work. He's on the West Coast, so it's a little bit earlier there. So that's going to end it for tonight's show. For more content, head on over to DynastyProsFootball.com. Thanks for tuning in, guys. If you haven't done so already, hit that thumbs up and subscribe. For the departed SC already, for JT and for Austin, I'm Tommy. We'll see you guys next time.